I think India is such a complicated country. I have a aunt in India who's also a writer, and she says that India lives in multiple centuries simultaneously. And I think that's really true. I think you can find horrific practices like gendercide and infanticide, and dowry burnings and bride burnings and all kinds of really extreme, hard to believe cultural practices. And yet, India elected a female prime minister before many other countries have, including my current country.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Yvonne Hunter, and I'm the head of programming here at the Appel Salon at the Toronto Public Library. It is my great pleasure this evening to welcome internationally best-selling author Shilpi Somaya Gowda in conversation with Global TV's Liza Fromer. Secret Daughter, Shilpi's debut novel, published in 2010, has sold more than 1 million copies worldwide in over 30 countries and languages. Shilpi was born and raised in Toronto. In college, she spent a summer as a volunteer in an Indian orphanage, which seeded the idea for Secret Daughter, and now The Golden Sun, another novel that traverses lives in both North America and on the Indian subcontinent, exploring themes of love, family, friendship, freedom, and identity. Shilpi lives in California with her husband and children. Our interviewer, Liza Fromer, is the host of the morning show at Global and formerly the host of Breakfast Television. She is an avid reader, a great advocate for books and book clubs, and a supporter of the library. Please join me in welcoming Liza Fromer and Shilpi Somaya Gowda.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. I am so excited to be here, in particular at the Toronto Reference Library. It's fitting because I spent much of my youth and childhood in various libraries in the TPL system, and they were a very important part of helping make me an avid reader and now a writer. So I owe a lot to this system, and you're lucky as not every city has an incredible public library system like yours, and one that brings in authors as well. So thank you to Yvonne and everybody here at TPL. This novel, The Golden Sun, is the story of two childhood friends in an Indian village who start their lives in the same place. A boy named Anil Patel, who is the golden son of his family, and a girl named Leena. Their lives diverge when Anil leaves for America to pursue his ambition of becoming a doctor, and Leena moves away to another village to have an arranged marriage. And then their paths cross again later in life when they are both adults and everything is a lot more complicated and the stakes are higher. So I'm going to start off by reading you a short passage from the beginning of the novel. It's called Maya the Hare Lip. Anil Patel was 10 years old the first time he witnessed one of Papa's arbitrations. Children usually were not allowed at these meetings, but an exception was made for Anil since he would one day inherit his father's role. As the only child present, he made himself as invisible as possible, crouching down in the corner of the gathering room. The meetings always took place here, the largest space in the largest house, in this small village nestled into an expanse of farmland in Western India. Papa sat at the head of the magnificent table with Anil's aunt and uncle on either side. Relatives, friends, and neighbors stood a respectful distance away. The room was filled with people, but the subject of the day's arbitration, Anil's cousin Maya, was not among them. Maya had been born a hare lip to Papa's sister, and her husband believed this to be a curse of the family into which he'd married. Anil's uncle argued he should be released from his marriage, to be free to seek another wife, one who could give him normal, healthy children. Maya's deformity, he said, was proof that his wife's womb was tainted and that she would bear him nothing but more bad fortune and unmarriageable girls who would remain a burden. Papa's sister sat nearby, weeping into the end of her sari. Papa then consulted the astrologer for whom he had sent, asking him to read Maya's birth charts. The astrologer found nothing untoward. Maya was born under a good star. No eclipses had occurred during the pregnancy. Finally, Papa turned to his younger sister. Did she love Maya? He asked. Was she dedicated to her husband? Would she give whatever was needed for their health and happiness? To all of these questions, she nodded yes, still weeping. This is a very difficult matter, Papa began after everyone else had spoken. Obviously, no one would wish for what has happened to Maya, but as you've heard from the astrologer, the problem did not come from the pregnancy or the birth. In this case, we can no more lay the blame for Maya's condition with her mother than with her father. There was a gasp from the crowd. Anil held the last breath he'd drawn. Even at the age of 10, he understood the danger of threatening another man's pride. Yelling matches had erupted among his relatives over far less. Every pair of eyes in the room turned to Anil's uncle, who looked shocked by the suggestion he could be at fault for Maya's affliction. A deep crease appeared between his eyebrows. So then, Papa continued, we must turn to the child. What do we know about Maya? Maya, he repeated. Her name means illusion. What is an illusion? Something that is not as it appears? He turned to his brother-in-law, reaching out a hand to his forearm. You're too smart to be tricked, aren't you? You know your true daughter is not this hair lip. You know your true daughter is beautiful and loyal and will bring you years of care and happiness, don't you? Anil's uncle stared at Papa for several moments. The furrow between his eyes softened, and very slowly he nodded his head. Papa smiled and sat back. So, what we must do is uncover your true daughter. It will take a strong and clever man. Are you up for the task? Yes? Very good. 3 weeks later, Anil's father and uncle took Maya to the charity medical clinic traveling through a nearby town, where she underwent an hour-long free surgical procedure to repair her cleft lip. Nobody else was aware of such an option. Papa was one of the few people in the village who could read the newspaper from town. A few months later, Maya had healed completely from the surgery. When the bandages came off, the illusion was gone, and in its place was a smile as beautiful and perfect as those with which Maya's 3 younger siblings were later born. Every year thereafter, on Maya's birthday, her parents brought Papa an offering of blessed fruit and flowers. The night Papa returned from the clinic, after Ma and Anil's 4 younger siblings had gone to sleep, Anil sat with his father in the gathering room, across the great table from one another, the chessboard between them. One corner of Papa's mouth turned up in a weary half-smile. Your uncle is a good man at heart. He just needed some guidance to find the right path. You helped him? It came out as a question, though Anil hadn't intended it that way. Papa wobbled his head and held up his thumb and forefinger a centimeter apart. It was really the doctor. His father's eyelids were beginning to flag, but Anil was eager to keep him talking. To tell me about it, he stammered, please? Papa leaned back in his chair and clasped his hands together. There was a big tent set up outside the market, right across from the coconut stand. 50 people were lined up outside. Inside were rows and rows of cots. The doctor came over and explained what he would do to fix Maya's lip. He showed us pictures, before and after, of other children he had treated. Papa shook his head once. Magic. A miracle, really. He looked up at Anil, his eyes moist. "You should be a doctor," he said. "You will do great things."
Now I just want to hear more. That's amazing. Was there something specific that inspired this story for you?
There is a tradition in Indian culture of arbitrating disputes within a family or community in an informal way rather than in a courtroom. So the original form of this was an assembly of 5 elders that took the place of formal judicial systems in rural areas. And over time, the custom evolved and kind of carried forward into many families and communities in different ways. And so I always grew up hearing stories about people's lives that were changed and witnessing disputes that were arbitrated in this way, usually by an elder male in my family or other families. And you know, as a child, I was never really privy to all of those conversations. I was often shooed out of the house or the kitchen when they were happening. And that, you know, that left my imagination to take over, which can be kind of a dangerous thing for a child that likes to make up stories. But I was always fascinated by this practice, and I thought it was really interesting the way communities would resolve their disputes this way, especially in contrast to the way we administer justice here in the West, which is so anonymous and so transactional. You know, we walk out of a jury room and we don't live and work together afterwards. So I thought it would be interesting to explore that idea of the burden of that responsibility on one character and how he might cope with it when he was thrust into it before being ready for it.
Burden of responsibility is an interesting way to put it, and what you just finished with the father saying, "You should be a doctor," and suddenly you assume because of, you know, cultural background or whatever it happens to be, or family dynamic, that's probably going to happen now. And so you explore identity as well and fitting in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it's amazing to me the power of expectation, and you know, the idea that somebody can have an idea planted in his head at an early age, and then that can turn into a lifelong ambition against all odds, which is what happened to Anil, and is, you know, parallels many real-life stories I know of immigrants who have left India and other countries. You know, I think that's fascinating, you know, that one little planted seed can grow like that. And Anil he has a lot of planted seeds. You know, he is expected to inherit this role of being the arbiter in his family. His father has a dream for him, which then becomes his dream of being a doctor. And those two are, you know, at odds with each other. And so he spends his adolescence and early adulthood sorting out, you know, whether he has the skills to do either of those things, and what he really wants for himself, and how he's going to either choose between them or marry the two.
It's also interesting how your surroundings can inform your identity and the way you see yourself as well. And so Anil starts in India, but he goes to the United States for school, and that introduces a whole other dimension to him.
Yes, so he leaves in his early 20s, he leaves his small Indian village and goes to a big American city, Dallas, to do his medical residency. And he goes with, I would say, you know, starry eyes and naive thoughts about what he is going to find in America. He's seen popular culture, and he knows a lot about Western medicine and the great technology he's going to have access to and in the hospital that he's working at. But there's very little he knows about the day-to-day life that he's going to face in America, the challenges as an immigrant. And in addition to that, he's going to be an intern in a hospital, and that means he's at the bottom of the food chain, which is a difficult job as it is, but he has the added complications of being from a completely different culture. So he gets thrown into an emergency room where he doesn't know what a drug addict looks like. He would have no reason to know, and he has never encountered a prostitute or, you know, a gang shooting, and these are things he has to grapple with.
How much of your own experience do you bring into your writing? I know you grew up here, but then you went to the States for school. Among the schools was Stanford to do an MBA, which has to be, I would expect, an overwhelming proposition in some manner. Do you bring some of your own life experiences into your writing?
I think less so in terms of the subject material because, I did start with personal experience in that idea of the arbitrations. Although none of the situations that I write about in the book came from my personal experience, they were all, loosely represented. I mean, there are, I grew up hearing about divorces and intergenerational conflicts and property disputes, and so there are definitely that type of flavor of disputes in the book. But I think just the experience of being in two worlds, growing up, I grew up in Toronto, which is such a great multicultural city. My parents were immigrants from India, so I went back and forth between the Indian culture we had at home and the Canadian culture I had with my friends at school, and then when I moved to the United States, I became familiar with the American world versus the Canadian. So I think I've had many seesaw type experiences where I've navigated multiple worlds, and I think that continues to be an interest for me. So I touched on it in my first novel, and it shows up again in this novel. So I think that sort of dual living and trying to find your identity amongst two different worlds has definitely influenced my writing.
How do these stories come to you? I'm always curious and love asking authors, does it come, some say it comes almost as a movie, and they just put it down. Others, it's a bit more blood, sweat, and tears. How does it come to you? Was there a moment that sparks it?
Yes, I think it's both of those for me. What usually happens with my novels is the first thing that comes to me is an image of a particular character, an individual who's pretty well formed in a difficult situation. So for Secret Daughter, I pictured Summer, this Caucasian woman who desperately wants to be a mother, trapped in a hotel room in India during the monsoons, really in mental anguish, waiting to hear whether an adoption that she wants is going to happen. And it's the first thing I sat down and wrote. In the final novel, the character's name changed, the book's name changed, and that scene did not take place in quite the same way. But it was that sort of crux of tension, putting somebody that I could empathize with in a tough situation and then kind of weaving all the stuff in around it. And with The Golden Sun, the image I saw was the passage that I just read that actually did make it into the final book, although it was probably rewritten over 100 times.
Really?
Yes, probably.
Wow.
So that's where the blood, sweat, and tears
no
comes
kidding.
in. But I did envision, a young boy on the verge of adolescence, witnessing something that he doesn't quite understand because he's too young to understand it, but yet he knows it's important, and he knows it's something that he is expected, their shoes he's expected to fill. So, Anil in that situation of already feeling conflicted and overwhelmed was the first idea that came to me. And then usually I think about different themes, characters, scenes, and they all, it's sort of like cooking for me. Like that first image is like the oil that goes into the pan, and then, some vegetables go in and some spices, and then it all just kind of has to simmer for a while in my head.
So do you walk away for a while, or?
I think it's just kind of, I might stroll away from the kitchen, but I don't leave the house.
Right.
And then I come back, and sometimes it's come to nothing, and it has to be thrown out, and sometimes, and I'm not even quite sure what I'm making. Is it a curry? Is it a pasta sauce? I don't know yet. And then, hopefully it gels into something that takes shape, and then I can kind of structure the whole novel around it.
Do you give yourself a routine every day? Is it I have to be in that chair for 6 hours from this time to this time, or is it a little bit more loose?
It depends what stage of writing I'm in. If I'm in, the stage I'm currently in, which is kind of the simmering stage, then I let myself explore. I usually read a lot of books. I do a lot of research, like I read nonfiction texts that have something to do with what I think I'm going to be writing about. I might see films that are kind of peripherally related, and I just throw it all into the pot. If I'm writing my first draft, if I'm ready to sit down and start writing, I sit down every single day and write for I wait until I have hit a certain number of words, and my favorite phrase about writing advice, people always ask me out, is ABCD, apply but to chair daily. Whether you are inspired or not, whether you have an idea or not, whether you hate what you wrote the day before or not, just sit down and keep cranking it out. And sometimes that's why it takes a long time, is you have to put yourself through the discipline of doing that. And then when I'm in the editing stage, it's a little different again. I try to get through a certain number of, fixing a certain number of pages. But I give myself quantitative goals because I find it keeps me on track.
Do you ask for advice? Do you have a go-to person? Is it just your editor, or are there other people in your life?
My aim is to take something as far as I can myself. So I will try to revise something or fix something or push it until I am not capable of doing it anymore. And with Secret Daughter, I got through maybe 2 or 3 drafts of the full novel before I got input from other people. With The Golden Sun, I think I got about halfway through the first draft before I got pretty badly stuck. And I go to my editor, and my agent and my editor are my 2 go-to people. They have excellent judgment, and they're great at critiquing and helping me kind of find my way out of the maze.
Were your children born yet when you wrote The Secret Daughter?
Yes, I started writing right after my second daughter was born.
Was it an amalgam of experiences? Was it becoming a mother as well as the time you spent at the orphanage in India that informed the first book?
Yeah, I think it was a confluence of a few things happening at once. One was the space happened to open up in my life to do something new. So I had moved from San Francisco, where I had a great career and a very full life, and I didn't really have time to throw anything new in there. I had my first child. And I moved to Dallas, where I couldn't do the same kind of work. I was about to have my second child, and I didn't know a soul. So, suddenly there were empty spaces in my day. And I decided that I wanted to, try to write, because I had always thought about writing, and this felt like the opportunity to do it. And I think the idea came to me, that seed was the experience at the orphanage that had stayed with me for a long time. But I think,
what was that like, that experience?
I spent a summer working at an orphanage in India when I was in college, and it was a life-changing experience because I had expected it to be a sad place. It sounds like it's going to be a sad place, an orphanage, but it was completely the opposite. These children, there were about 100 kids there, ranging in age from 2 to 16, and they were so full of joy and life, and I got really attached to them, even though I was 19 or something. I could imagine why somebody would want to adopt a kid out of an orphanage. And I thought about them for many years afterwards, and eventually enough time passed, and I realized they were not 3 and 5 and 7 years old anymore. They were adults, and they had left the orphanage, and I just really wondered about what had happened to them. And I think then, becoming a mother, I thought about those kids differently. I thought about, I think this happens to a lot of people, you think about all the children in the world a little differently. All the children in the world suddenly become your children, in a sense. I mean, you empathize a little bit more, and you care a little bit more, and so I think all of those things coming together at the same time created the opportunity for me to write that book.
In both books, you write a bit about women's power, or their lack thereof. Is that something that interests you as well?
It does. I think India is such a complicated country. I have a aunt in India who's also a writer, and she says that India lives in multiple centuries simultaneously. And I think that's really true. I think you can find horrific practices like gendercide and infanticide, and dowry burnings and bride burnings and all kinds of really extreme, hard to believe cultural practices. And yet, India elected a female prime minister before many other countries have, including my current country. So I think it's part of what I tried to show in Secret Daughter is it's a little more complicated. There are different layers, and there are many families, like the Indian family in Secret Daughter, the adoptive family, where the matriarch of the family, the grandmother in that case, really controls a lot of what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, she made very controversial decisions that people in the family followed because, you know, she was the boss. And I think that happens a lot too. So, you know, I think I tried to muddle up the black and whiteness of it a little bit because I see it that way when I go. You know, I don't think that the problems are as simple as they might seem, and I think there's a lot of richness and beauty that is not obvious necessarily to outsiders. So I do think, you know, it's a natural question for me since most of my family's extended family still lives in India. It's a natural question I've had my whole life is, you know, what would my life have been like if my parents hadn't left? I could very easily have had a parallel life like one of my cousins. And it wouldn't have been like, you know, the problems that I write about because my family's from a, you know, educated middle-class community in a city. But it would have been different, you know, so it's interesting to think about that.
Have you taken your children back?
Yep, they love it.
I've heard that India is very welcoming of children, that it's much more inclusive. If you're traveling with children, it's not like sort of a look down your nose. It's like, bring them in, let's do this.
Yeah, it's a very, I mean, that's where chaos can reign, and children are welcome into that. And it's a very family-oriented culture. Mm-hmm. So, you know, people live in extended families and joint families, and there are always children and elderly people running around, and it's all it's part of the mix.
You still use your MBA as well? You still work in business?
I don't work in business, although publishing is a business. I don't do the same kind of work I used to do, but I think I don't really use it. I mean, it's, you know, I have no training for what I'm currently doing, and I'm not utilizing my degree the way that, you know, I probably thought I would when I made that investment. But
what made the fork in the road?
You know, it was moving. It was that, you know,
Just
geographic move and suddenly saying, okay, and I never intended to do it as a career. I thought, I'm going to do this, you know, the way people say, like, one day I'm going to run a marathon. I thought, oh, one day I'll write this novel and then I'll go back to my, you know, regular life and career. But I've been fortunate that now I get to make this my career.
These would make great movies. Would you like to see that happen sometime?
Yeah, you know, I'm very fortunate. Both books have been optioned for the screen. So I'm excited to see what happens. You know, people always ask me, do I have a vision in mind or do I have an opinion about what should happen? And I like to follow the advice of one of my favorite authors, Michael Cunningham, who said, when an author sells their film rights, screen rights, you should think of it as selling a house. You hand over the keys and you walk away. You do not stick around and tell them what color to paint the shutters and whether they should keep the doorknobs or change them. So, you know, I would be excited to see. It's obviously hard to get a film made, so, you know, not all books get made into films, but I'm excited to see. I have a great deal of confidence in the production teams that have optioned these, so I'm excited to see what they do.
It must be a bit scary when you put so much into it and it's your work, it's your thoughts, it's your all these things, and then okay, go. Now you do something with it.
You know, I actually think that books are very much an interactive experience. You know, half of the experience is what I wrote on the page, and half of it is what you experience when you read it. You know, you fill in the blanks in your mind, and you have an imagination, and you might have pictures of the characters. So, you know, I think once it's done, it's a collective experience, and people are going to have, you know, different subjective experience, responses to it, and I think that's part of the fun.
And what makes book clubs fun, and I'm sure made them so popular that everybody comes and you're like, oh, you thought that?
Yeah.
That never crossed my mind.
Yes, I have been in the same book, you know, a couple of the same book clubs for, you know, a dozen years, and not once have we all agreed on the same book. Mm-hmm. Which I think is really, you know, it's very good to keep in mind that this is all subjective.
Are you reading anything now?
I just finished The Story of Beautiful Girl, which is about 5 years old. And now, you know, my wonderful publishers at HarperCollins have given me suggestions of like 6 new books I need to read, so I'm probably going to delve into one. I think I'm going to read The Illegal next. I've been waiting because it's, I like to read in paper, and
did you read it?
I haven't been carrying it.
There you go. We got a positive reference right there.
Oh, I'm sure. No, I know it's going to be amazing. I just want, some quiet time to actually read it, not read it on airplanes.
Yeah, I bet we're like where my side table in my room, my bedroom is stacked this high.
Yeah.
Just stare
Yes,
at
it is.
longingly and try to find the time. I think you said something earlier about the fact that you're in a stewing stage again. Are you working on something
Simmering,
again?
yeah.
Simmering?
Yeah, I am. I have my next idea that I've been working on for probably about 6 months. So I'm reading some research texts, and I'm doing a lot of work on the main character. It again is a little bit different. I always seem to get challenged by an idea that's new, which is not maybe the wisest thing, because then it feels like I'm starting from scratch in terms of my learning. But I'm really intrigued by this new idea, so we'll see if it turns into something edible.
Shilpi Somaya Gowda, thank you so very much.